Well, hey, folks, welcome back once again to Lincoln Square Media. It's our first day out of the gate. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. We've had some amazing guests, but now we are with Katie Phang, my friend, who is one of the smartest people I know, a lawyer who also understands the politics of the moment, the media of the moment, and who has an amazing gift for cutting through the shit and getting to the real thing, cutting through the BS and getting to what's really going on in this country right now. And Katie, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some breaking news we've had in the last few minutes.
Yep.
We just heard that John Roberts, in a quite remarkable statement, smacked down Donald Trump square across the face about attacking judges. Where do you see this going from here? Because this seems like a fairly unprecedented move by John Roberts.
Well, it's about time, right?
Well, yeah.
I'm sure the decimation of the rule of law clearly wasn't alarming yet, and now suddenly has become alarming. There was some type of undefined or ill-defined tipping point, I think, for somebody like Chief Justice Roberts. We've
Right.
met it. But beggars can't be choosers at this point, so I'm going to take it for what it is. It is a win for the rule of law. It is a reinforcement that norms and institutions can still be preserved and protected. The practical implications, as you say, Rick, cutting through the bullshit, it gives me some hope that the escalation to the Supreme Court of the United States perhaps will not be the greenlit win for Trump and the Trump administration and the lawlessness that it's promoting when we see somebody like Chief Justice Roberts step forward and say that impeachment proceedings are not the appropriate vehicle if you disagree with a federal judge's ruling. We also heard that yesterday from Chief Judge Boasberg. Lucky's angry. Lucky's angry.
Lucky's outraged by the offensive to constitutional norms.
He actually is. But we also heard that from Chief Judge Boasberg. Well, he would poop on it if he could. And that if you, oh yeah, he's mad. But if you don't like the outcome of something, the appropriate remedy is to appeal. Take an appeal. Move for reconsideration or modification or revisiting what's happening in this case. But the remedy isn't doing what we saw. The remedy is not doing what we saw happen in court yesterday and what we just saw get filed today in response to a court order. I know we're going to get to that, Rick, but I think it all kind of dovetails together right now.
Yeah, I do think there's a sort of chaotic moment here that we're in, that Trump's people believe they were going to have an absolutely free runway to do whatever they wanted. They would just either ignore or bypass the courts or hope they got it to the Supreme Court fast enough to stop any sort of resistance to them. But it really has turned out to be shocking to me. Even some of these more conservative judges, you have judges appointed by Trump, by George W. Bush, by Bush 41, even a Reagan judge out in the first of the cases on the 14th Amendment question on birthright citizenship, who have said to these guys over and over again, you have no legal leg to stand on in most of these cases.
But that's where I think I just want to ask you, don't you think that, Katie, that this also sends a signal to sort of ripple into other judges? I mean, some of them that were thinking maybe they should lean in a little for Trump, they might, this signal from Roberts might be actually stiffen some of them up a little bit, or am I wrong, mistakenly thinking that? I'm not a legal mind, so what is your opinion?
I feel like we've all gone to law school over the last God knows how long, considering all the illegality that's come out of the Trump administration, term one and now term two. I will say this, Joe, two things. One, if we're really objective and we take a objective lens to the landscape of the judiciary, it really has been outliers. Okay, I'll give you an example. Putting aside SCOTUS, which lives in its own holy hell. You got the Eileen Cannons, right? You've got the Matt Kaczmareks. You've got the not Dale Ho. You've got I forget his name. Crap. Anyway, the point is, you've got judges that are there that are predictably going to try to be ironically activist judges. And the reason why I say it's ironic is Republicans for a long time railed against the idea of the activist judge, and they defined it
I
as being
recall.
a Democrat or like a democratically appointed judge. And it's this idea that a judge takes the bench and decides that they want to say to hell with the law and precedent and rules and
Right.
procedure, and that they want to do whatever the hell that they want to do because they want to change the law a la Dobbs, right? Let's overturn Roe v. Wade. But if you think about it, I would say that most of the judges have held the line. Again, there are outliers.
Hmm.
Second overriding kind of thought that I want you guys to think about is this, and I have been saying this for a few weeks now, especially since the inauguration of Trump term two.
Mm-hmm.
We will know when there is a true constitutional crisis in that the executive has decided that the judiciary has no value whatsoever anymore when Trump lawyers don't even bother going to court. So I want you to stop and think about that. So far, in civil litigation or any of the criminal cases, whatever, Trump lawyers, either personal, civil, criminal, DOJ, government, whatever, they still go to court. They still go to court and they argue. Whether there is total compliance with the court order, that's a whole other cup of tea. But they are still deeming the arena or the forum of a court as being the one wherein which the battles are being fought. So I think that should give some of us a small bit of consolation that there is still something that is holding. There is still, you guys, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but you remember Hodor? Hodor, Hodor, hold the
Hodor!
door, hold the door. Well, the door is being held through the collective efforts of judges, both Republican appointed and otherwise, that are
Mm-hmm.
saying
Mm-hmm.
this is not going to happen
Yeah.
on my watch.
Yeah.
Katie, I think one of the things that I've been watching for is what's the big case? What's the
Yeah.
big case the Supreme Court is going to try to say, all right, we've given you a lot of executive power. We've been very expansive about executive power in the last 5 years. What's the case where Roberts finally digs in? I don't know that it's in Roberts's character to really dig in, but I was surprised by the crispness of today's notification to Trump that that Robert seems to finally have woken up that there are three separate and independent branches of the United States government.
I actually think, and I'm big on management of people's expectations. It was something I did as a
Yeah, yeah.
lawyer for clients. Let's manage expectations right now squarely on Lincoln Square. Everybody subscribe, follow Lincoln Square.
Thank you.
So here's the deal. Um, a lot of the wins that have been against the Trump administration as of late through the Doge litigation, birthright citizenship, et cetera, a lot of those, let's stay in the Doge land, those have been temporary restraining orders wherein the administration has been told that the process and the procedure by which they've gone about doing things was inappropriate. So,
Okay.
and I want to make sure people understand because the termination of employees is within the purview of the government, but there's a way within which they
Sure.
have to do it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So so people may be reinstated, but if the Trump administration actually does things the right way, even if we think it's shitty and we don't like the result, it might end up being okay. So some of these wins are temporary, as evidenced by the language temporary
Right.
restraining order. Now, things like birthright citizenship, that is one of two, I think, cases that are currently kind of winding their way through the litigation world that we should pay attention to. Why? Because as we know, birthright citizenship is in our United States Constitution. So what SCOTUS does with something like that is worth watching. And then the Alien Enemies Act litigation that we're seeing in front of Judge Boasberg that had its,
Yeah.
genesis this weekend, that also is one of the bigger ones when it comes to executive power and the
Mm-hmm.
challenges that SCOTUS kind of laid before the feet of the American people when they gave Trump this idea that he could be king of the world. Because Trump is now having his lawyers go to court through the DOJ representing that his executive powers extend into international airspace, international waters, and that they go beyond actual federal statutes and proclamations. And so I think that we need to watch those two very carefully because they both, I think, flirt dangerously with the actual solidified idea by way of actual decisions or rulings that we've seen that Trump as president can get away with some really bad stuff.
Yeah, Joe.
Well, the question is, he is, he is just the president. That's all he is, and both of those crossed that line, I think, right? I mean, where he's exceeding it. The question is, again, though, if he, I think it's easier for him to ignore the second case than the first. In other words, if the court rules against him on birthright citizenship, I don't see how he can enforce, how he can skip it and sort of ignore it because states are involved and everything else. But the second one, if he were to just ignore that case, their ruling, what this is something I think everybody's been asking, Katie. What recourse does the court
That was
have? I
actually
mean,
my
in
next
terms of
question.
imposing it.
Like, what does the court do when they say, no, we're not sending the
So
marshals?
well, that there is a process. There's always a process. What is it? The wheels of justice, they grind slowly, but they grind.
But
I mean, for those of you that are maybe having some type of, fanfic going ideas of Trump being dragged by his, ear into jail, it's not going to happen, at least
yeah.
not in the immediate sense. What's going to happen is contempt proceedings have to move forward. A court order, in order to be able to get across that finish line of an actual finding of contempt, folks, again, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to have something called a motion for a rule to show cause, as in,
Mhm.
why should you not be held in contempt of court for openly and intentionally defying a court order? There's an evidentiary hearing. It takes time to be able to do that. Once that's done, then the court can decide what it wants to do. Sometimes it starts with just fines. Disappointing, I know, for those of us that are average Joes and Janes. If we were to defy a court order, most of us probably would not be looking at a fine. But yes, it could start with fines. But I think it ends up being the internal kind of gut check that I've been talking about lately, which is a lawyer for the DOJ yesterday told the chief judge of the DC courts, federal courts, that their client told them to make this argument. If I had a dime for every time I have gone to court where I have heard shitty arguments and I've heard the lawyer sheepishly look at the judge and say, well, it's because my client wanted me to say this. First of all, that is a non answer. But second of all, it
Right.
just goes to show that that lawyer needs to go back to law school, maybe needs some continuing legal education, probably shouldn't be a lawyer because we have an independent obligation as lawyers to abide by rules of professional conduct. And we cannot advance frivolous arguments, even if that's what the client wants you to do, because it's done in bad faith. And so then Judge Boasberg then is, after he makes his own factual findings based upon evidence as presented to the court, which seems very obvious to us, but again, there's a
Right.
process. Then the judge could sit there and say, you know what, I'm going to put you in jail if you're going to continue to defy the order. The challenge for somebody like Boasberg is, who do you put in jail? Do you put the lawyer in jail or do you
Mhm.
haul the ICE officials into jail? Do you take Tom Homan? I mean, right now, the declaration that was filed was by this guy, Robert Cerna, who has a very fancy title and sounds like he knows what's going on in ICE and DHS, but who knows? I mean, I think you'll start finding people, if somebody like Boasberg really kind of lights a fire under people, you'll start seeing that people are going to be finding Jesus really fast. And there's going to be a lot of punting of responsibility and passing of the hot potato, and it'll eventually land in somebody's lap. But I hate to break it to people, but it's not going to be Donald Trump.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
We had a question in the audience just now.
Sure.
What can be done about Elon Musk, who is apparently
Mm.
doing some things
Yeah.
that are violating federal law, that are violating Privacy Act thing? What can be done about a special government employee in the weird position that Musk is in right now, which we don't really know? We've never really had an official, actual readback of what his federal job position really is, but he certainly seems to have enormous power. Someone asked that question, and I don't think there's a lot, but I'd love to get your take on that.
Well, we through the good hard work of some very brave lawyers like Norm Eisen and others, they are suing Elon Musk in his individual capacity. And why that's important is because you want to go after Elon Musk and strip him of any type of idea that he has an official role in this administration. And you also want to
Hmm.
be able to create the need for him to be able to respond in his individual defense, because the discovery process that is proceeding in some of these cases will reveal what's really going on. We know that there's a woman who I think is the fall guy or fall gal in this
Right.
instance, right, who's being told that she's, you know, the putative head of this Doge, which again is not a congressionally approved and created agency, right? It's not a real department. And so I
Right.
think the litigation process is going to reveal kind of, assuming arguendo, they haven't destroyed evidence, which I wouldn't put past some people, right? Right? I know, shocking.
Yeah.
But
Right.
the discovery process should be able to reveal the level of culpability and how dirty people's hands are. And in doing so, that's when you start creating the individual exposure for somebody like Elon Musk. Now, in a finer, more nuanced way, if there is stuff that Musk is doing that is violative of securities laws, if it's violative of
Sure.
other type of laws, in and of themselves that are outside the scope of anything that he's currently doing for this administration, ill-gotten gains, something that's inappropriate, you know, civilly or criminally, then it's really up to just citizen plaintiffs as well as our law enforcement, right? Our state, you know, we have some state attorneys general that are kicking ass, that are doing the work
Yes.
that other people aren't
Yes,
doing.
they are.
And those are the people that I think are watching all of this incredibly carefully and trying to find ways to neutralize the threat of Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers that question to the person who asked it in the audience, because there is, I know that it feels like Elon is politically bulletproof right now, folks, but believe me, even Elon Musk's board of directors at Tesla will eventually start saying, "Yo, chief, can't do that. You're opening up a whole set of legal liabilities for this organization that we can't cover."
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that the unusual nature of his position has been what has made it hard to like find an attack surface to go at him on so far, because we don't really know what he's doing. Is it real? Is it official? Is it unofficial? Is it just made up out of Trump's head? So, Katie, I wanted to ask you another question though.
Wait,
About
I just want to
yeah,
say
yeah, yeah, go.
one really quick thing. Um, I don't think that this illegal Doge Elon Musk stuff, guys, has anything to do with. Um, I mean, I think he power trips. I think that's part of it. My primary concern is the data access, and not
Mm-hmm.
that he wants to look
Hugely.
at our bank accounts or anything, right, Joe or Rick? I think I want people to understand that there is immense value in data,
Yes.
like as in voter rolls. So think about how much money he spent to be
Yeah.
able to get Trump into office. I
Yep.
know, and you guys know, that in the political arena, kingmakers are people that have access to voter information. That is how you figure out who to go to, how to get their donations, how to figure out their vote,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the data access. It's what he gets when he
Yeah.
mines and data mines through his tech bros. And with
Yep.
that information, he doesn't have to stop at people like Donald Trump, who is just a Putin, you know, patsy. He can go and he can actually influence like other elections on a state level and other federal elections, right? Like that is what freaks me out the most.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to trying
Yeah.
to kind of
Absolutely.
cut his knees out from underneath him, I really want to know what the data access has been, because I really don't think it's, let me see if you got $2 or 2 million bucks in your bank account. I don't think it's that. I think they want to get this information for voter rolls, because that is what he wants to be able to sell. He wants to make money off of that.
There is a
So,
great
Katie, one of
value
the
in
people
data.
asked in the, well, one of the people in the just asked a question. I think is one I've always had. Is there some way to do a class action suit on against him on the data?
That's a good
On just
question.
that alone, don't we all have standing, or am I? And that was the question somebody asked else in the chat asked about, but in a different way. How do they become a citizen plaintiff? But what's your
Yeah, so the short of it
do you
is,
have a do you
yeah,
have any response to that? Is there a way to do that, or is it just
yeah. So the short answer is class action is very kind of nuanced, but the
that's just
short
a
of it
crazy?
is as you say, people have to have standing to be able to do it. And I think that we're going to be getting more information along the way in some of these cases that's going to allow people to determine whether or not they actually have been injured or potentially could be injured. I think it's so amorphous right now because we don't really know what has been accessed, is kind of the short answer.
Right. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, Katie, is Trump's novel approach to the pardon power, which, like a lot of things, like Article 1 and Article 2 of the Constitution, he just seems to sort of like pretend don't exist. The pardon power does not have any sort of rollback or retrospective look back or any provision in the Constitution that says you can go back and erase a pardon that a prior president gave. What's your interpretation of where I mean, I think my read on it was mostly a political stunt by Trump just to rattle people's cages. Where's that in the legal space in your head?
So legally, Trump cannot just declare, especially by way of a Truth social media post,
Right.
that the Biden pardons have now been eliminated. One, two, it's such a head fake by Trump.
Right.
But I like to remind people, don't underestimate us, right? We can walk and chew gum at the same time. I understand it's a distraction. I agree that it is. But I do think it's worthwhile to acknowledge twofold. One, that legally speaking, he cannot do that, as in Trump cannot
Mhm.
just eliminate the Biden pardons. But two, I think it's important to show politically, to your point, Rick, that this guy thinks that he can do whatever the hell he wants to do, which is a telltale sign of an autocrat or a dictator, right? He
Sure.
thinks that he can ignore the law and do these things. I posted yesterday, one of my greater concerns is less about Trump and his BS in that declaration about the auto pen, but more my concern
Yeah.
about people like Bondi and Patel and what
Hmm.
are they going to be doing in terms of trying to run with that, knowing that there's no good faith legal basis, but are they going to start trying to investigate the January 6th Select Committee and others?
Right, and that idea that they're gonna go behind the curtain and start digging around and trying to investigate Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger or anybody else on the committee, to my mind, is in some ways where Trump's really headed with this. He wants to keep intimidating people politically, keep people shut up, make people think that they can't possibly stand up to him. I think it's 99% of that announcement was an intimidation tool and trolling plus an intimidation tool.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that he's going to be able to succeed. It's this idea that everybody cows in fear and that everybody capitulates in advance. It's the easiest way to eliminate resistance so that he can just steamroll people's individual rights. But I did see Adam Kinzinger, who always deserves applause for being so strong, him and Liz Cheney, in the face of
Yep.
all of this adversity. And Adam Kinzinger's like, bring it on. Bring it on,
Yeah.
because I'll drag you to court as well, and we'll see whether or not you're going to be able to survive this, you know?
As the guy who's been threatened by Trump with lawsuits several times, the answer with that, you never normalize it. You always just respond like, "Go fuck yourself, bro." No, and which was exactly what Kinzinger said.
There is a legal way to say that, Rick.
I'm sure there is a legal way to say that that's very polite
Hmm.
and very respectful, and that the judge will not look at you and say, "What's wrong with your head, son?" No, but those pardons, I think, this overall structure of abuse of power, of the abuse of executive power, I think is really the only story or the main story of Trump right now. That idea that he is a king, that the ambit of executive power is unlimited, and that he's got a permanent get out of jail free card from the Supreme Court. I mean, I think that Supreme Court decision overhangs a lot of where Trump has derived power in the second administration.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, Rick and Joe, and I think Joe's fixing his connection.
Yeah.
We actually haven't seen or heard, I think we've seen it, but we actually really haven't heard Trump very publicly declare the invocation of that ruling, right? From SCOTUS. It's almost like this, it kind of is the
Yeah.
undercurrent, it kind of undergirds what he's doing. And those of us
Hmm.
that pay attention know that that is theoretically the legal premise within which he's operating. But what's interesting is he hasn't actually said it. Now, the closest I think is, and people have debated whether or not this was an accurate reflection of what happened, but at the joint address, when he was saying thanks
Oh,
to
right.
the
We looked
Supreme Court.
at Roberts and said, "I won't forget."
Yeah. I mean, you see stuff like that. And again, is it debatable in terms of what the intent was? I mean, I, trolling is something that Trump tries to do, doesn't always do well. But
Right.
then I think the other component of that auto pen Biden pardon thing, Rick, was the unintelligent masses that are MAGA
Mm-hmm.
feed off of the inaccurate information, right? They feed on the idea. Sorry, hold a second.
That's all right.
They feed on the idea that Trump is providing them with some type of legally accurate information when fundamentally he
Right.
doesn't.
Right.
And so he just decides here's chum in the water for the MAGA.
Mm-hmm.
Here's chum, enjoy it. By he drops it in the water, and then the feeding frenzy ensues. And so now, of course, in that cesspool, which is X, everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, auto pen this and Biden incompetent that." When Trump is incompetent, Trump truly merits the 25th, but Trump
Right.
auto penned the crap out a lot of stuff too. So
Of course
what's
he
good for
does.
the goose is good for the gander, right? So this is again just chum in the water for MAGA.
Yeah, I think it really is. I think it really is partly feeding that media machine, which is something we're trying to work on here on Lincoln Square and on Substack now, is to have a countervailing and smarter and more analytical look at these things without being boring and without being pedantic about it. Of Because right now they're not going to get a correction on Fox. Fox is not going to pop up there and say Trump is wrong. This is crazy. This isn't real. Although not to give Rupert Murdoch a ton of credit, I did notice today the Wall Street Journal, um, uh, Fox Business, and the New York Post all were critical of Trump insulting the judges and going around the judges. I thought that was kind of an interesting signal from Team Rupert. But as a rule, the MAGA media ecosystem is built so they don't get countervailing information. They don't get critical information. They get spoon fed a very delicious vanilla pudding every day, and they like the vanilla pudding. Um, but one of the fundamentals is the law is the law, and if the law is still the law, and this country still has laws, I think this is going to be the most important determination of what saves or dooms this republic. Is, do the courts hold? Does the law hold? Does eventually somebody in the legislative branch say, "Hey, wait, we have we're a branch of government also. Why we're not giving away all of our power, are we?" I hope springs eternal. I'm never been like Mr. Sunshine, but I do wonder, if this is going to be the thing that gives us uh, a pathway out of the worst ideas in Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's brains every day.
So I want to remind a lot of people that are tuning in that part of that Supreme Court decision, wherein Trump was basically said you have immunity, right, for decisions
Mm-hmm.
that are made within the ambit of your executive power. If you remember, part of the majority analysis was this idea that if you were to take away from the president the ability to make these decisions, that it would hinder or handicap or create some type of obstacle to effective leadership. And they
Mm-hmm.
also cited to this idea that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so if we don't kind of give the respect to the office that it merits, then the next thing you know is you have a Democrat president who's going to turn around and kind of do what they want to do in terms of
Right.
of things that are going to be harmful to Republicans, right? And then it's going to become a tit for tat moment where everybody just takes retribution depending upon who ends up in the Oval Office.
Right.
Um, we have never seen retribution um, of the likes until we had Donald Trump, period. You cannot
No.
point to a Democratic president and say that they have ever had retributive
No.
action like Donald Trump has. So the reason why I remind people of that is the Supreme Court also is due for a gut check. We've talked about federal judges that have done the right thing. There will be appellate
Mm-hmm.
court justices that are already doing that as well, that are upholding decisions that are saying that, OPM has overstepped and people need to be reinstated, et cetera, even if it's
Right.
temporary. The Supreme Court's gut check is already starting to happen today, including the Chief Justice, because you cannot allow somebody like Trump to be able to say that the judiciary has been neutered and rendered impotent. At that point, you should just take the Constitution and rip it up and use it for toilet paper, because
Right.
that's what you're saying is happening. And so this is when I want to remind because not all of the Supreme Court justices need this reminder. There is a lifetime appointment that comes, federal judges, appellate court federal judges, and the Supreme Court. He can't touch you.
No.
He can't touch
No.
you. So you have a job for life. Do your job. Do your job and tell a tyrant that he can't be a dictator, and have some respect for yourself, for your job. Because if you don't, who's going to do it for you?
I mean, Amy Coney Barrett should wake up every day thinking, I'm going to live 40 years longer than that son of a bitch.
Look, she just, give her some flowers where they're due, albeit maybe
Sure.
cheaper ones, but whatever. Like, she's finding some cojones once in a while.
I feel like she has in the last couple of rulings there has been and you can also tell because MAGA is so angry with her, and all of them are constitutional law experts suddenly online whenever she has ruled against Trump in some way. But I sense with her, she's trying to find a legally appropriate and defensible way to knock Trump around on some of these things where she's even said, this is too much even for me. This is too much even for me. I'm going to try to add Joe back in.
Yeah, bring him back in. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do this. All right, we're giving it a try. Okay, but yeah, she's got a long time to go.
A lot of them do, right? And so,
Yep.
but some of them don't. And that's really the scary part of it, right? The idea that you get somebody like Thomas who's like, peace out, although I doubt it, because this is the man's only freaking
Oh, they're going to
defined
pull Thomas
lifeline.
out of that place feet first.
Like, he's going to be, yeah, exactly. So, but like somebody like Amy Coney Barrett, I really think that she was almost like a super one issue conservative. I feel like the
Yeah.
Dobbs thing was such an important thing for her. She made it clear what her opinion was on abortion and reproductive rights. And,
Yep.
but you know this, and Joe, you can chime in on this too. A true conservative pre-Trump would never tolerate what he's doing.
Right.
No.
Never.
No.
So
Absolutely
this,
not.
Well,
right?
there's nothing
So
conservative about anything he's doing. I mean, not
Right.
one thing.
I said this on a previous broadcast. I said I was talking to Mehdi Hassan, and I said, like, don't forget what they've done is taken all the branding and the logos and the symbols of the Republican Party and rebranded it as this post rule of law, MAGA, fascist, Trumpian thing that is not synonymous with constitutional adherence on anything so far.
right, Joe?
No, but yeah, and they've appropriated the flag too. I mean, I mean, basically, they've taken all that symbol and all the tradition of the Republican conservative movement, and made the imagery theirs, but destroyed any connection to conservatism. At least in my lifetime, that I've seen, is just incredibly amazing. The number of Republicans who went along with that, though, and still do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So, Katie, one of the other things that has been fascinating to me is we've touched a little bit on like how is the illegality of Trump world going to end up being implemented, and I think Pam Bondi. I know Pam Bondi from Florida. You know Pam Bondi from Florida. Um,
Yeah.
Pam is going to be absolutely a secretary for what Trump wants. She's a stenographer, I think, for what Trump
I was going to
wants.
say that's a compliment. Secretary's a
Yeah,
compliment.
right. Right, and you've got guys like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at the FBI. Just as I think almost every single Republican accusation is a confession, uh, as they weaponize government against Trump's political enemies, what do you think the line folks in DOJ are gonna feel about this? The line folks in the FBI that aren't political appointees, that aren't rubber stamps for Trump and his revenge plans.
I think that I asked myself when Trump did that horrific desecration of the DOJ last
Oh,
week. You don't even have to be a former federal prosecutor or a former member of staff or anything of DOJ to be
Right.
horrified by what we saw and heard. But I kind of asked myself, who's in the audience and cheering? Like,
Yeah.
I guess I should probably find out for you guys, but were you required to attend if you were in the DOJ last week? Like, I don't
I
remember,
can
Good
find that
question.
out.
right?
I
I'm
have a way to find that out.
curious.
I'm gonna find that out.
Because you know how it's like that wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, oh, it's
Right.
voluntary. And,
Everyone is
Yeah.
strongly encouraged to
right?
attend. And by the way, your quarterly review is coming up.
You have to doge your 5 things you did, whatever. But it made me wonder who was there cheering because there are several line prosecutors that truly are the ones that are in the pits every week that are
Right.
fighting the good fight.
Yep.
And they are people that, just like you and I and those that are tuning in, we have mortgages, we have bills to pay, we have families to support. I mean, these
Sure.
are our jobs. A lot of these people went to law schools and they also have student loans, right, that are impacted by what's happening. And so they are making decisions on a day by day basis. I think what we have to do is encourage the good FBI agents, the good prosecutors, and the good people that are working in any and all federal agencies that are impacted by what's happening, but especially those that have terrifying powers of arrest and investigation and
Right.
prosecution. We need to create a sense of community for them wherein they understand that when we say that we are going to be on the right side of history, we are going to be on the right side of history. And that
Absolutely.
community is going to be there to help support them in whatever capacity you can do. I try to tell people we feel this insane pressure that we have to do something that has maybe a national impact. I am asked all the time, what can I do? I feel helpless. What can I do? And I try to tell people, even in your own backyard, finding somebody that needs help, finding somebody that maybe was impacted by Doge, finding somebody that's just struggling because they need to talk to somebody about what's happening where they are, or they're feeling like they don't really know what to do, just talk to them and let them know that they're not alone. It is the sense of isolation that I think really drives people to not do the right thing.
I think that's right.
This idea that they will not be a part of something or they won't have an exit plan that will help them safely land, that's what terrifies people. And I think you see all the people that are tuning in to watch right now that are following and will follow Lincoln Square. Like these are people that are like-minded. And I like
Sure.
to remind people we outnumber them. There's more of us
We
than there are
do.
of them. So don't forget that.
No, and that's what we're trying to build here is that build that community, build that platform where people can come together as a community and get the tools to fight this back and know they're not alone, that we're all in this
Right.
together, and grow it and get more people to join us and grow the movement. We've got to take. They've been in a movement to destroy democracy. We've got to create and grow a massive pro democracy community, and that's.
That's right.
Where we can distribute our information, knock down the propaganda, and take this stuff on, head on. As and to know to let people. You're right, Katie. People are not alone. We need to bring people who feel alone in this, who feel isolated. We need to support them and pull them in and let them know there's a community here that they are part of and will be supported.
That really is something I think, Katie, that was a really good point. And same with you, Joe. That idea of building a community is something we're going to work very hard on here, folks, and work very diligently to ensure that the things you're hearing out of CNN and most of the Washington media and sometimes even MSN, there's a great gravity in Washington to normalize everything, to treat it as an old battle. One side says this and one side says that, and to both sides everything. One of the reasons this community I think is so important is that we're going to fight to say sometimes that there are true things and false things. There are good things and bad things. There are things that have merit and things that are evil, and to call them out directly. And this fight is, yes, it's against Donald Trump's movement and Donald Trump himself and the evil he's doing, but it's also to save this country from from the fake choice that was given. The
Yeah.
fake choice was you either pick Trump or the world burns and you all have to become communists. It was a bullshit choice. But too many Americans took it, and they took it in part because they got normalized by watching this on Fox a million times. And we don't have the reach or the size or the budget, certainly, of Fox, but what we do have is folks like you and a community like this that's growing and building up, and we're grateful to have friends like you, Katie Phang, and I'm so grateful you came on on our inaugural day here on Lincoln Square Media. We're very grateful to you. I'm grateful for your friendship beyond all this, and 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 Joe, as always, my friend, your insights are never, Joe, folks. When history is written, you're going to realize that Joe Trippi built a lot of the things that saved us. You'll learn that as the
Oh,
world unfolds. You'll learn that Joe Trippi built a lot of the tools that ended up saving us from direct mail and email to social media to a whole bunch of different areas, and to single-handedly almost launching a platform against Twitter. All the things that Joe has worked on, you if you're not a political insider, you may not know it, but you should respect it. Anyway, Joe, Katie, thank you guys so much for coming on. And Joe,
Thank
I
you,
think I'll
guys.
see you in about a half an hour.
see you then.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks everybody for watching.
Congratulations.
Do me a favor, folks. Sign up to support Lincoln Square Media. There are several tiers of subscriptions. Most stuff is going to be free. Some stuff is paid. You support that. You support the work that we're doing here and the work of the Lincoln Project. We appreciate y'all. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
guys. Congrats. Bye.
See ya. Thanks, Katie.